But David, this brings me to my point because that the space shuttle launch that we watched, that was sponsored by NASA. But the rocket that I saw a couple of days ago was sponsored by a Silicon Valley tech CEO. And I just want to point out here, David, just how wonderful it is that Elon Musk is saving the world. You see,
stop triggering me, Daniel.
No, I'm serious here, David. Here's a guy, right, who, born genius, IQ off the charts, right? And he looked around one day and he said, look, this world is failing. We've got climate change on the brink. We've got the great plastic garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean, right? We've got construction companies strip mining our rivers of sand and eroding our beaches. This world needs a savior. And he said, I'm going to be that savior. I'm going to take us to Mars, but I'm going to do it through a process, right? First, I'm going to revolutionize transportation and dramatically cut carbon emissions by inventing the electric vehicle, David. I mean, Elon Musk single-handedly brought the electric vehicle onto the streets.
Daniel, you're going to give me an aneurysm.
Onto the streets that we drive on today.
Ugh.
And then he single-handedly learned Russian so that he could read the rocket manuals of the old Soviet era, so that he could go to Russia, figure out how they built their rockets, and bring that technology back to America, get a bunch of investors together to start SpaceX, and basically radicalize and paradigm shift our rocket technology so that we can eventually all go to Mars and start afresh with a new utopian planet.
I don't even know where to start. This was the longest trigger. I don't know why I let you go on for so long. You're just trying to get a rise out of me, and I don't appreciate this. This doesn't need to be an Elon Musk episode because I'm ready to go off for like 20, 30 minutes. First off, though, it is worth noting that the rocket launch that you did see actually was paid for by NASA. It was a resupply mission. So, checkmate.
5,000 pounds to the International Space Station.
Yeah. Well, just very quickly.
Well, okay. Well, so maybe he gets a little funding, but he did invent the electric vehicle, David.
Stop it. Elon Musk comes from money. You mentioned mines. That's where his family's money comes from. Emerald mines and other weird sources of funding. They're actually very strange and shady if you dig into it. He has all sorts of stories about bragging about how wealthy he was as a child that he's later tried to retcon and rewrite and say he came to America with nothing besides, the emeralds in his pocket. And his weird racism that he carried over from there. And then also his weird accent, which apparently Grimes said is not even real. Like he puts it on, it's a fake accent. And he's like an Elizabeth Holmes thing going on where he's really tired and really fucked up. His accent disappears. So it looks like he's doing the same sort of weird fake voice thing that she did before all the Theranos stuff. But okay, so he's the guy attributed with PayPal or whatever, but really he just happened to be co-founding a company called X.com that was merged with another company with a noted evil person, Peter Thiel, who together they started PayPal along with several other co-founders. Musk's company was bought primarily because they had paperwork that was pushed through earlier for financial regulation. Their software was worse. Elon Musk tried to rewrite the entire server stack of the new PayPal in Windows Server, and all the engineers revolted and banned him from touching any software because his code was so bad. So whatever, he made a bunch of money off that. Then he went looking for somewhere to put his money. He found a company called Tesla, started by two co-founders. He became an early investor in that, slowly kicked out the other two founders. Eventually, they had to settle out of court for a large undisclosed amount of money. And part of the settlement was that Elon got to rewrite himself as a founder of the company, even though he came in much after it was already started. He also had promised the first vehicle to one of the co-founders, but he actually gave it to Elon Musk's friend instead. There's a whole bunch of crooked, horrible fucking shit he did to those two poor guys. Started Tesla, made a bunch of promises with Tesla in order to get all sorts of federal funding and subsidies. For example, he promised California that they were going to make battery packs that could be swapped out very quickly with an automated machine. They built a demo. Maybe you've seen it before. California gave them tons and tons of money and subsidies for this technology, which they then never produced. But they got to keep the money. They're currently being sued by Germany and Canada for subsidy fraud. All sorts of just horrible subsidy fraud. Even with all that, the company is 17 years old at this point and has lost something like $10.5 billion, which if we'd invested in renewable energy would have dramatically done way more good for the earth than all the impact of every single car that it's ever produced. So, I mean, I don't want to get into that. I could literally do a whole series on Tesla. I'm not going to. There's lots of podcasts that already cover that. Then he put obviously a bunch of his money in SpaceX. SpaceX is just reusing technology developed by Lockheed in the 70s with this automated landing systems. He found an engineer, a brilliant rocket engineer who designed a amazing rocket engine in his garage, hired him, took his technology, found somebody who actually knows how to run a company, put it together, but is trying to do all these plans that seem to be economically unviable. As far as we know, SpaceX has never made money, even with massive subsidies from the US government and the military. And yes, this is a military contractor. They do a lot of horrible military work, and they should be shamed as such. They're reusable rockets, while very cool to watch, the economics of them don't seem to really be there unless you can get a vast many more reuses than they've been able to achieve so far. So, like I said, the technology for doing this has been around for decades. It just didn't seem ever economically viable because of the damage done to the rocket on the process and the cost to refurbish it and the risk it introduces in reuse. So he's created two vastly unprofitable companies so far, neither one which is doing particularly good for the world. Again, Tesla's a bad use of subsidies and money. It incinerated that cash in order to give rich people fancy cars instead of actually doing good with if it had been properly invested. SpaceX is a giant defense contractor, making the world a worse place. His other investments, he bailed out his cousin's company, Solar City, defrauding a huge amount of investors to the tunes of billions of dollars in order to protect SpaceX and Tesla. He's currently being sued. That will go to court in the Q1 of 2020, and there'll probably be a 7 to 9 figure settlement that'll come out of that. Of course, he has the Boring Company, which is trying to drill tunnels in an unsafe way using an old refurbished sewage tunneling drill. And currently they're making all sorts of plans and making ridiculous promises. And then as soon as governments look into this actually and start crunching the numbers, they find it's actually a much worse deal than anything else. But inexplicably, the company continues to get funding from Silicon Valley and venture capitalists who don't know where else to put their money because there's just so much money sloshing around. And the alternatives are negative yield bonds or throwing it into a stock market that looks like it could blow up at any point. So why not just incinerate the cash in Elon Musk subsidies incinerator? So they do that. Neuralink, which is just in the news, which is a brain interface for humans and computers. They bragged about it in the presentation about how far they are in advance of FDA-approved systems. However, they are behind cutting edge in the non-FDA systems, which they neglected to mention. There's a lot of things left out in the presentation, like the fact that many of the rats they've done this to have died within a couple weeks. And it's a generally problematic thing. Plus, who wants Elon Musk to have access to their brain? Only fucking sycophants and psychos. Like I said, I could keep on going. I'm not going to, but I don't know why. Why did you do this, Daniel? Why did you trigger me? Nobody wants to hear me rant for 10 minutes about Elon Musk. I'm done.
Well, I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree, David.